Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we're going to discuss My Dinner with Andre, but before that, we're going to talk about the November 2020 Criterion announcements, the first couple episodes of Ted Lasso on Apple TV, and the first episode of Lovecraft Country. So, join us!
Hello and welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris. With me, as always, is a man who's always trying to get me to go to dinner with him. Mike, how are you doing today? I can't handle a large conversation. That's the main reason I said no to dinner.
Yeah, well then maybe we shouldn't have started a podcast.
That's true, but there's no dinner involved, so I can't do both at the same time.
Yeah,
That's
you can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah. Also joining us is a man who hashtags everything justice for John Lenoir, the waiter in My Dinner with Andre. How are you doing today, Justin?
I'm good. I've been waiting since 1981 for justice, and, that's a long battle, but, a battle that's really been going on since before I was born. But, hopefully we can see this out.
We can take a step in the right direction today.
Do you want to fill the people in on what justice he needs?
Yeah. Did he not get a tip?
He didn't get a tip. At least I didn't see one. And also, I feel like he was amazing in this movie. And he's never got recognized for his great performance.
The undersung hero.
Yeah, he carries this movie.
Okay, if this is your first time listening, you have stumbled into a Casually Criterion episode, which is a Criterion Collection focused episode that we like to do usually every other week here. And this is where we review a film from the Criterion Collection that is voted on by the listeners. Now, before we get into the main review, we'll be doing the usual News on the March, where we talk about the recent news and things we've been watching. So if you haven't seen My Dinner with Andre, you can just go ahead and keep listening for a while, and it'll all be timestamped. Then we'll go ahead and move into our Casually Criterion review for Spine number 479, My Dinner with Andre.
That's right. And if you want to vote on our next Criterion film, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. The polls will be up on our Twitter account. When you're hearing this, that poll will be live, so go follow us on Twitter. But we'll also post about the polls on Facebook. If you want to send us any questions, topics to discuss, anything like that, you can send those to any of those social media accounts, or you can send them to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so already, and you like the show, you want to help other people find it, go onto iTunes or whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, give us a review, give us a 5-star review, give us a thumbs up, whatever it is that your system requires. We want a positive review.
Okay, and I guess we should go ahead and just move into News on the March, unless we have anything else to go over here.
I don't think so. Nice and breezy.
All right. Chris?
Easy cheesy.
Oh.
News on the March!
Justin, do you want to go ahead and kick us off with the 2020 Criterion announcements?
Sure, yeah, of course. So today, after a lot of waiting, I don't know if you guys are in the Criterion forums on like Reddit or Facebook, but it seemed like a lot of people were really complaining about when are they going to release the announcements for like 2 full days now. Mm-hmm. But they finally announced them, so we have them just in time for this podcast. So I will run through them really quickly. Starting on November 10th, we have a film called Girlfriends from Claudia Whale. Then on November 17th, we have Moonstruck by Norman Jewison, which stars Nicolas Cage and Cher. And also on November 17th, Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, starring Forrest Whitaker by Jim Jarmusch. And then, of course, as we talked about last week, on November 24th, we have the Essential Fellini box set, which if you guys want to hear a discussion about that, listen to last week's episode. And then last but not least, also on November 24th, we have Martin Scorsese's The Irishman from last year.
Yeah, which I guess is probably the MVP besides the Fellini box set, in my opinion.
I think for the average person, like the Moonstruck is a pretty popular movie.
Yeah, I've heard of Moonstruck, but I've never seen it. And in fact, what I'm looking at here doesn't even have the Moonstruck Criterion cover. It says it's like a placeholder art.
And that's probably why it got delayed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, they delayed it, and then they ended up putting it out because they couldn't delay it anymore, I guess.
Everyone was complaining. But at first, like when I first saw that, I was like, "Oh, interesting cover art." Before I saw his box art coming soon, because I thought it was like a 3/4 moon or something that also kind of mimicked the Criterion C, and I was like, oh, "Okay, this maybe works." I don't know.
Makes sense. Yeah, they should just keep it. Why?
Yeah, just remove that box art coming soon part.
That's my favorite cover they've released in years.
It's minimal.
Yeah. Classy.
But I do like Moonstruck, though. I've seen it one time. It has been a while, but I watched it with my dad and a woman that he was dating one time. She was like, "This is my favorite movie. Let's watch it." And turned out it was really good. I thought it might be kind of, I don't know, lame, but I liked it quite a bit.
Because it has that cover where Cher's like dancing or whatever.
Yeah, with like the moon and
yeah.
Cool. But The Irishman, that's the big one. I think we've all known that one's coming for a while.
Yeah. I like the cover art for it.
Yeah, for sure. It's very different, I think, cover art wise. It's like a painting.
Yeah, but it feels right for the movie.
And it's interesting that for this one, because they kind of announced the big movies from last year, like Parasite and Marriage Story and Irishman. I guess they were all the Netflix movies were going to come to Criterion. And the other two, Marriage Story and Parasite, kind of just got art that was based around the posters for the film. Like the covers are art that we've seen before, right? And Irishman, they went and did something a little different. At least I haven't seen this image before in relation to Irishman.
No, most of the Irishman promo images were just kind of people standing around.
Yeah, it was like heads.
Yeah. Like, so I understand why they would want to do a different kind of cover than like the official Netflix marketing posters.
Yeah, but I like this movie a lot. It was, I think it was in all of our top films of the year.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Last year, so we're obviously all excited about this one.
Yeah, this and Marriage Story are like my big ones that I want right now.
Yeah, I just got Marriage Story. It's a really cool package. I don't think we've talked about it, but I don't know if you saw it either, but it opens it up, and like each side of the way that the package unfolds, one is his side and the other is her side, and it actually has little papers that are the copies of the notes that they wrote each other from the beginning of the movie.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome.
So you can actually read like the, it's very obviously like printed,
Sure.
but it's
still a
handwritten.
cool touch.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So Girlfriends, I have not heard of at all.
No, me neither. Not a lot to say there.
It's like independent, female-driven movie, female leads and stuff. According to Criterion website, it's like pioneering for independent, like girl trying to make it in the big city type movies or something like that, which sounds cool.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
But then Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai is a film I've wanted to see forever, and I never have. So have either of you guys seen that?
No, this is actually the Jim Jarmusch movie that I hear is like the one I need to see.
Yeah, I've actually seen this. It's a very long time ago, like around the time when it first came out.
Like
I
late
remember
90s?
liking it quite a bit. When did it come out?
I think like late 90s, right?
Yeah, late 90s. Sounds about right. Early 2000s. Let's see. 99.
If I'm not mistaken, I think I remember the trailer for Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai on the VHS for Blade.
Wow.
No,
That's,
I don't
that's the
think
most
so.
familiar I am with that movie. Is
Ghost Dog
whatever-
came out in 99. Blade came out like...
98.
Okay, maybe then. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm right. Yeah. It's on some VHS that I watched a couple times when I was a little kid.
It's too weird to not be right, is how I see it.
Thank you.
It's like too specific of a memory.
Yeah.
But Jim Jarmusch is a director that I've not seen a film by him that I love yet, which I also haven't seen a lot of his films yet, but a couple of them I've seen I really didn't like, so it's hard to get myself mentally up for a Jim Jarmusch movie based on what I've seen.
Yeah, I think the one I've seen that I liked the most was it Broken Flowers? Did he do that?
Mm-hmm. He did, yeah.
Yeah. And then I think Dead Man, I've seen that.
I haven't
Coffee
seen
and
Dead
Cigarettes.
Yeah, Coffee and Cigarettes. And then what's the big
Down
one?
to Earth?
No.
Not Down to Earth. It's Down
Not
by
on Earth.
Law.
And then Down by Law.
Stranger Than Paradise is another one.
Yeah.
Anyways. Down by Law. Anyways, yeah.
Yep, those are Jim Jarmusch movies, all right.
Yeah. But I like Coffee and Cigarettes, and then Stranger Than Paradise I wasn't very big on, and I saw one of his newer films that I don't think anybody was very big on, actually, but The Limits of Control.
Yeah. My brother saw Only Lovers Left Alive and said it was good.
I saw that. Yeah, I did. I watched it for Cinema Recall when we did the Tilda Swinton episode.
Ah, yes.
Cool. All right. Well, anything else you want to touch on?
No, those are solid set of releases for November 2020.
I know we didn't talk about the Fellini box set much this episode because we did last episode, but like, add that into everything we just talked about, and wow.
Yeah. A lengthier conversation on that for sure. We talked about that for a while. Cool. So, Justin, I believe next on the docket is something that you watched recently and that I watched a little bit of. So why don't you get us started?
Yeah, so it's Apple TV's Ted Lasso. This is one that I've been kind of excited about, but also kind of curious and maybe slightly skeptical about because are you guys familiar with Ted Lasso prior to this series?
No, I actually watched the first episode, and while I was watching it, I messaged you, I think, and was like, has anyone watched this show yet?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't really sure what I was watching. So, yeah, why don't you explain a little bit what Ted Lasso is?
So Ted Lasso was like originally a promo that NBC Sports ran when they got the rights to start airing all of the Premier League games, which is like the top league in England, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole concept was basically kind of like a really good SNL digital short type sketch that was like 4 or 5 minutes long, and it was Jason Sudeikis playing this character named Ted Lasso who got a job coaching a soccer team in the Premier League over in England, but he came from like he's very kind of like a Southern nice guy who had only coached like American football, didn't know anything about soccer. And that was the premise of the comedy sketch show. It's him just kind of making an idiot of himself over trying to coach the soccer team. And it was really popular. They brought it back for like the second year that they were doing it. They did like a little sequel sketch. Again, it was like 4 or 5 minutes. And that was kind of it. This would have been back in 2013, I think, maybe 2014 that those originally aired. And then they announced that like, oh, they're turning it into a full on series for Apple TV with this character. And maybe it's like the history of, SNL type sketches being turned into full fleshed out things like a movie or a TV series that had put me off of it. But I was like, oh no, like they might just ruin this really great thing that's wonderful as like a 4 or 5 minute short. Right. Yeah. But if you try to take it and expand it to 20 to 30 minute episodes, like
it could go anywhere between like Corky Romano to like Night at the Roxbury to like MacGruber. There's the quality range could be anywhere.
Yeah, and none of those really get me excited, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Do you know, sidebar real quick before you continue, did you know that they were going to make a TV series out of MacGruber?
I just saw that recently, and I saw the MacGruber movie, and that worked for about a movie for me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, sidebar. So, sidebar over. Continue. Ted Lasso.
But yeah, so the Apple TV series just came out recently. They're releasing episodes week to week. So at this point, there's only 3 episodes out. I've watched all 3. It's basically the same concept, except they've made a fictitious team that doesn't actually exist that I'm aware of. In the sketch, they put him in charge of like a real big soccer team that actually exists.
Right.
And so they have real soccer players or whatever.
Yeah. So they can play themselves.
Yeah. So yeah, this one, he goes over there. He's from like, I think college football or something like that. And he's teaching this soccer team, and it's this big like publicity stunt. I don't want to go too much in the details by the club to like hire this guy and see if he can turn their team around because the team's no good. But that's the basic premise. It's kind of a comedy show. It's not as silly as the original sketches were. There's actually a surprising amount of heart in it to me. Like I find Ted Lasso, the character, to be really kind of heartwarming and touching a lot of the times. Like he's just got such a sweet, like sunny disposition on life, and he's got a lot more depth than I expected them to give the character. So I don't know. So far, I'm really enjoying it, and I've kind of talked a lot at this point. So Mike, you said you've watched, I think, the first episode. So what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah. So far, it's certainly not bad. I don't know that I'm hooked, and I don't know that I understand tonally what the show is going to be yet, because like you said, he is a very like sweet, likable guy. He's not necessarily like a clown in like the same sense that like the main character of like a Saturday Night Live movie would be a clown, but he's not like worldly or hip or cool. So he's like a fish out of water. And it seems like what I told you a little bit before we started recording was this reminds me a lot of Major League, the movie Major League meets Harvey with James Stewart.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart and Harvey is a very good comparison for like how you feel about the Ted Lasso character.
Yeah, like he's ridiculously nice. You don't want to see mean things happen to him. But also, I'm nervous going forward to watch more episodes because it seems like the series is setting him up to be like in situations where drama has to happen. And it seems like it could either be funny or it could also be one of those like sad funny. You know,
Yeah.
I can't quite tell yet based on the first episode, but I'm down for it. It's just probably not something that I want to watch week to week. Like, I don't think it's interesting enough based on the pilot to like merit not binging it when it's all done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think sitcoms do struggle to work week to week and watching it, once a week. It not, an hour-long show, a drama, you kind of have some things you can hook into, and maybe this will have that, but I'm with you. I kind of wish it was all out right now because I binged like the first 3 episodes and I'm like, oh, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Because I have to wait week to week now.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. It seems fine. I'm willing to watch more.
Yeah, I will say being 3 episodes in, I think it really finds its feet. And the 3rd episode particularly really left me off feeling like, you know what? I think I really like the show so far. Whereas with episode 1, I was kind of in the same boat as you. I was like, it's decent. I don't know how funny this is supposed to be or how, heartwarming or maybe even sad at times this is supposed to be.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it finds its tone a little bit better in episodes 2. And then by the end of episode 3, like I said, I was very much into it, wishing I could immediately go on to 4.
It's really hard for a sitcom to establish itself in one episode, I think.
Yeah. Most pilots like that are kind of iffy, I think.
Yeah, there's very few like pilot episodes of anything that are like so good that you're like, well, I'm here for this entire series based on the first episode.
But, grain of salt, I love soccer, so this show may just appeal to me on that level. Even if it's bad, there might be some part of me that would just still watch it all and enjoy it, kind of like I did other soccer-based things like the English Game that came out on Netflix this last, 6 months ago or something like that. That wasn't very good, but I watched that whole thing. So, that's my grain of salt with it. But I do think it's funny and worth checking out even for the non-soccer fan.
I like Jason Sudeikis.
Jason Sudoku, I think is
Sudoku. That's the right.
That's as good as any name.
Yeah. I think he's a really good actor and able to kind of go where you guys are saying. He's able to do serious and goofy really well.
Yeah, I think if you like him, you'll like this because my wife, she really likes this show so far, but she also has a big giant crush on Jason Sudeikis, and I think that's that's what's
it's certainly not hurting her enjoyment of the show.
Yeah, just kind of everything she does, she just like is kind of blushing and grinning, So yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Move over Olivia Wilde. Is he still dating Olivia Wilde?
As far as I know.
Okay.
Good for her.
Good for Olivia Wilde?
Yeah.
I was going to say good for him.
I figured that's what you were going to say, so I tried to jump in.
I think she's the bigger catch between the two of them, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Fair enough. Cool, but that's it for Ted Lasso. I might report back, I think, whenever the whole series is wrapped up and just give some final thoughts on it, but we can move on for now.
All right, so I guess the only thing left on the docket before we move into our review is the pilot episode of a show that, as we record this, premiered last night on HBO. Speaking of pilots that hook you, or may not hook you. I don't know, we'll see. So I'm talking about Lovecraft Country. And Chris, you haven't really got a chance to talk a whole lot. Why don't you let us know what you thought about the first episode of Lovecraft Country?
Yeah, this is a show I've been looking forward to. The Alamo Drafthouse had a book club earlier this year, and it was actually right at the time of the pandemic. So I was reading the book that this is based on, but the pandemic happened, so I was only about halfway through, and I kind of forgot about the book. It was good, what I read, but other stuff was happening at the time, so I kind of dropped it. But so this is a show I've been looking forward to. I found this interesting, and I need to watch more before I can make a final like verdict on how I feel about this show. I feel like it could go either way right now. There are things I really liked about the show, and some of that was like I liked the element of sci-fi and horror, and there's certainly racism as horror in here, which I found really interesting. I like the main actors pretty good. I don't know that he's had an opportunity to do too much yet or to see him spread his wings in the show yet, but he's really good.
Who are you referring to?
Jonathan Majors, the actor from... Oh, what was the movie he was in last year that was really good?
The Five Bloods?
Oh, yeah, he was just in the Five Bloods.
That was this year. Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Yeah, Last Black Man in San Francisco is the one I was thinking of. But he's good in The Five Bloods as well. It'll be interesting to see where this goes, especially like as it picks up some more threads that were in the book, or if they drop those threads as well. Yeah, so I'm kind of interested in hearing what you guys have to think about it. I'm certainly going to watch, at least a few more episodes. It's good to have appointment viewing. I haven't had a weekly show that I've been watching.
Real quick, I guess for people who don't know what this is already, this is basically... so the plot seems to be, based on the first episode, is that what year are we in? What decade are we in? We're in the Jim Crow era.
50s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 3 black people are basically traveling through the South, through the area where H.P. Lovecraft is from. And so also what it's doing is it's sort of dealing with like racism, and it's dealing with horror elements taken from H.P. Lovecraft's work, right? And it's kind of melding the two into some sort of plot. And
they're making the Green Book. So if you like Green Book, this is how the Green Book got made.
But yeah, so based on the first episode, I say that this show, so far, it's okay.
Yeah.
Great production value. A little on the nose writing-wise. It's not very subtle. And I think if that continues, it could probably get kind of distracting and annoying. But the budget's there, and the ideas are there. I worry based on the first episode that going forward it's going to be pretty not subtle or not. I don't necessarily not subtle, but not. It's going to be very
obvious of what the show is about.
Yeah, very on the nose. I guess is just what I'm trying to say. So it's going to be very on the nose based on the first episode. So what do you guys think of that?
I knew that was going to be a complaint that you would have, and I've been thinking about it.
But basically what I'm hearing is when you watched it, you felt it was on the nose too, but you knew that I would be the only one to call it out.
Well, I was interested if you would.
But you felt it, and that's the complaint that you knew that I would arrive at, so it means you felt it and you noticed it.
I mean, sure. Like, it's racism as horror. And a lot of movies especially horror movies, aren't very subtle about, like, what their points are, so I'm not necessarily...
But the best ones are.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily... I mean, I don't know. I'm not super worried about that. And I also don't mind racism or the fact of racism being in your face and not subtle. I think that's how I kind of come away from this. Like, but Justin, what do you think?
Well, I mean, the main character's name is Atticus Freeman.
Yep.
Which is not very subtle, no. I think.
It's funny, though.
Yeah, I enjoy that. I think. But in all seriousness, I think I do have some worry. I think we're going to be in a little bit of the same situation we were in back when we reviewed the Watchmen series, where there was, Chris on one side saying, they didn't have a problem with the not subtlety of the show. And then Mike saying, I got a problem with the not subtlety of the show. And then for a while I was in the middle and I worry that, like Watchmen, at some point this show is going to tilt me to Mike's side, right? So right now I'm a little bit in the middle because I can see some shades of how ham-fisted Watchmen felt to me at times in this show. But I also agree with Chris that, like, racism at this point in time in this country, maybe it doesn't need to be subtle.
Well, to be fair, that's what I've been saying in our Spike Lee reviews and stuff. So I feel like I don't want to be painted with the brush of this person on the podcast who has a problem with, like, racial content and things. Because I feel like I'm sort of being painted into a corner here to where, like, I feel like I need to defend myself. There's a difference between having a problem with something and then also expecting that, like I expect not to be, like, talked down to. Like, I don't need to be explained everything through like really on the nose dialogue in the first episode.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to paint you into a racist corner that you're racist. Please, that's certainly not what I was trying to say. But however, because what Justin says about Watchmen, it is similar. Now, what I will say is I was much more on board for Watchmen after the first episode. I think that was a much better episode.
I disagree. I think this is better than the first episode of Watchmen.
You think it's better than the first episode of Watchmen?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm on the opposite side of that. I like the Watchmen episode.
I think
better.
the cast in this is much like the acting in Lovecraft Country. I don't think the acting in Watchmen in any episode was particularly strong.
It kind of bugged me from the word go to.
Yeah. Like, I think Watchmen is full of lesser than actors, except for Tim Blake Nelson.
Even, what's her name?
The main character's good, but she's such a mystery for the longest time. I forget what's the main character's name? Regina King's character.
Sister
Knight.
Sister Knight is the hero name. I can't remember her regular name.
Yeah.
I thought
like,
Regina King was
the
really
actress
good.
who played Lori, not good.
Smart, Jean Smart, I think is her name.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get too bogged down on the acting of Watchmen.
Yeah.
All the acting in this is good, and I agree with that.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. Is I think Jonathan Majors is awesome. And what's her name? The girl. It's like she's a hit. She's like a huge hit right now because everyone's like in love with her based on this pilot.
Journey Smollett?
Journey Smollett she has like another part of her name too, like Lee or something.
I don't see that on IMDb.
Okay, maybe she got a divorce. I don't know, but whatever. She's great. I think if she was the main character of this show, which it might end up being that way, I can't tell really. She's definitely a major part of it.
In the book, gets her own storyline. So we'll
okay,
see
good.
That.
Yeah, I'm down to watch her do anything. I'm down to watch Jonathan Majors do anything. I love the cast, and it seems like based on the first episode, it's going to be like a hero's journey, like traveling through the South, going through all kinds of like racial tensions and horror elements, Or I think, Justin, you described it as like an Odyssey type situation.
Yeah, I think so, where you encounter the different creatures and different obstacles. The Odyssey has, the sirens and then the Cyclops, etc.
Yeah.
And this will have like that, but with these sort of H.P. Lovecraft creatures.
Right. And I think the Odyssey type elements of it, if that's kind of the vibe it ends up going with, that can kind of help with some of the on the noseness of it all, right? Because that's kind of, it would be like this fantastical reality, right? I just don't know that they paved the way in the first episode enough to like, for me to know that we're in like a heightened reality or that we're in like the real world with like his dreams, So yeah. I'm down. I just, I hope I like it better than Watchmen.
Yeah, for sure. I hope you do too.
I hope the writing is a little stronger. With like plot devices and elements like that, and dialogue. Like I feel like you can say something and you can also be smart. You can be smarter than your audience and say something. You don't have to like be on the same level as your audience and like make it easy for like the lowest common denominator to understand.
And I think there's just heavy shades of that sort of tone and that sort of like message delivering, and it's very similar subject matter that they're getting across that brings the shades of Watchmen to Lovecraft Country already.
Yeah.
If you're the listeners out there, why are you talking about Watchmen so much? That's why.
Yeah. I dread whoever has to edit this. You better not make me sound bad.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to paint you in a corner or anything. Sometimes that happens, and I apologize for that. But I do look forward to talking about this at the end. Like I said, I am intrigued. It'll be interesting to see where it goes and how it turns out. I think, better than Watchmen, the vibes I got from this. Did you guys ever watch True Blood? I got more True Blood vibes.
Oh God,
from this
I watched
than I did.
Not very much True Blood.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly better than True Blood, but like
that
kind
show
of fantastical
is
elements and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of where is this going in this first episode that by the end of it, I kind of know at least like some expectations for the rest of the series. So I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah. I'm definitely more excited by the last half of the first episode excites me because I'm like, oh, this show's going to move. Okay, cool. Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm anxious to see where the season goes. And I have a feeling I know what it's going to be like. And that excites me. So yeah. I'm anxious.
Cool.
Okay. So do we have anything else that we want to talk about with Lovecraft Country?
Nope.
No. Okay, Chris?
Nope.
All right, so let's go ahead and move into our review for My Dinner with Andre.
You know, in the sexual act, there's that moment of complete forgetting, which is so incredible. Then in the next moment, you start to think about things. Work on the play, what you've got to do tomorrow. I don't know if this is true of you, but I think it must be quite common. The world comes in quite fast. Now, that again may be because we're afraid to stay in that place of forgetting, because that again is close to death, like people who are afraid to go to sleep. In other words, you interrelate, and you don't know what the next moment will bring, and to not know what the next moment will bring brings you closer to a perception of death. You see, that's why I think that people have affairs. I mean, you know, in the theater, if you get good reviews, feel for a moment that you've got your hands on something. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a good feeling. But then that feeling goes quite quickly. And once again, you don't know quite what you should do next. What'll happen? Well, have an affair, and up to a certain point, you can really feel that you're on firm ground. You know, there's a sexual conquest to be made. There are different questions. Does she enjoy the ears being nibbled? How intensely can you talk about Schopenhauer at some elegant French restaurant? Whatever nonsense it is. It's all, I think, to give you the semblance that there's firm earth. Well, have a real relationship with a person that goes on for years. That's completely unpredictable. Then you've cut off all your ties to the land and you're sailing into the unknown, into uncharted seas. I mean, you know, people hold on to these images of father, mother, husband, wife, again, for the same reason, because they seem to provide some firm ground. But there's no wife there. What does that mean? A wife, a husband, a son. A baby holds your hands, and then suddenly there's this huge man lifting you off the ground, and then he's gone. Where's that son?
All right, so as always with our Criterion films, we will not be doing a spoiler-free section, so we're going to jump straight into talking about the film, spoilers and all. So if you have not seen My Dinner with Andre, you can pause the podcast right now, go watch the film, and then come back and finish listening. Or if you don't care about spoilers, which, I mean, really, this film, not a lot of spoilers can happen.
No.
The title is a spoiler.
Yeah. So go ahead and listen if you want to, and then go watch the movie. I don't care.
Me neither. All right, so My Dinner with Andre was directed by Louis Malle, or Louis Malle?
Yeah, Louis Malle.
Louis Malle. Starring Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory. The IMDb synopsis says...
Wait. You forgot somebody.
I don't know his name.
Jean Lenoir?
Do you have his name on hand? Is that the character name or the actor name?
That's the actor name.
Yeah, he's just known as the waiter.
All right, well... He's gotten his time to shine now. Thank you, Chris, for speaking up. The IMDb synopsis says, two old friends meet for dinner as one tells anecdotes detailing his experiences, the other notices their differing worldviews. That's a good synopsis.
It is. Very simple. It seems too simple if you don't know what this movie's about, probably.
No, but in reality, it tells you everything.
Yeah.
I think the title is all that you need for the synopsis. My Dinner with Andre, and that's all.
Oh, the synopsis should just be his dinner with Andre.
Yeah. Someone has dinner with Andre.
Yeah, we chose this one based on tough sells, and that's the reason why, for anybody who hasn't seen the film, is that it is a film where two old friends meet for dinner, and that's the movie. They sit at a table. We don't cut away. We don't do flashbacks. We don't do anything. And we just watch these two guys talk and have a conversation.
Yes.
And that's a tough sell because I feel like not a lot of people would want to watch that.
Yeah, exactly. So we have, though. And so who wants to get us started?
I can, since this was my choice on the poll.
Do it.
Even though I think I did talk about My Dinner with Andre for News on the March like a year and a half ago or so, maybe 2 years ago when I watched it. But I will talk about it again and get my thoughts out of the way. This is a film that I have probably seen. I think this is probably my fifth time to watch the movie. I've kind of lost count. And it's a film I'm a really, really big fan of. I was very excited to watch it again because what I've found, because the first time I watched it was probably about 10 years ago. And I've watched it every couple of years since. And every time I watch it, I just find their conversation more and more interesting. I think it's because I'm getting closer and closer to the age that these two guys were when they did this movie, and they wrote it from natural dialogue that they would hang out and just talk and record it and then transcribe it. And then Wallace Shawn turned it into a script. So they're basically talking about real conversations they've had. And I think that comes across. They feel very natural. And a lot of the things they're talking about just feel more and more important to me as I get older. I think I'm also just really in love with the idea of just refusing to cut away to anything else, refusing to put any other action into the movie. Like as much as I love a film like Before Sunrise or Before Sunset, they make the characters walk around in different locations and put some action and dynamics into their conversations. Right. And I love for lack of a better word, just like the backbone the gall to make a movie like this. I have no limit to my admiration for them setting out to do this. It's one of the things I really appreciate. And not only is it just like the fact that they had the audacity to do it, but I think they pulled it off because I find this film fascinating. I have no issues like checking my watch during this film or checking the time. I can just watch these two guys talk. I think the original version of the script is 3 hours, and I wish I could watch that movie, even though they didn't film that version of the script. Because I find their conversation fascinating, and I'm sure we'll dive into it, but I am head over heels in love with this movie. I have been since the first time I watched it, and I just fall in love with it more and more every time I watch. So that's where I am at, so I will pass it off to Chris. Why don't you go next?
Yeah, so this is the first time that I've ever seen this film, and why haven't I seen this movie sooner? I don't know why I hadn't. I certainly knew of it in pop culture, but I'm glad I got around to it when I did. And there are movies that try to do the same thing or try to be interesting, like you were kind of saying, the Before Sunset trilogy and stuff like that. But I don't know that I've ever seen a movie like this, where it's just two guys talking. And I certainly haven't ever seen a movie where like one guy essentially talks for the first hour of the film. And I like, when Wallace Shawn starts talking, I'm like, oh, wow, I forgot he was there. And then I look at how long it's been, and I'm like, he's been talking for an hour? It's so surprising. I mean, and that's not even like checking my watch. It's just like kind of keeping in touch with where I'm at in the movie and stuff like that. But yeah, it's so well acted by the two actors. I find the story of it, like you were talking about, fascinating. That, it was just these two guys, and they recorded lots and lots of conversations, and then they like basically whittled it down to a 2-hour conversation. It feels very personal. Like that, it's possible that these two guys are playing themselves. I think they are. They would deny it. Well,
they just have their own names.
Yeah, they have their own names.
Have their own names, but
and they're based on experiences.
Yeah,
that they've actually had.
So basically, yes.
Well, they deny it because I was reading about it, and they were talking about how it's not them. Like Wallace Shawn was like, the guy he played was too afraid. But I don't know. And they also said that if they were to do it again, they would just switch roles and do the same thing. So I don't know. They deny it where we fit in. But that's exactly the fun of it, though, is because it feels so personal. It feels like they're playing themselves. They're certainly at least playing their own personalities, if that makes sense, I think. But yeah, it's so fascinating that I could be gripped by this movie that has, very little going on, at least camera wise, right? Like we just got done doing Y Tu Mama Tambien a few weeks ago, and this, camera wise is nothing compared to that, but it's the way it's done and the way it's handled is so well done that it's really astounding. So yeah, I'll pass it off to Mike now. And what did you think?
Yeah, so I think this is my third time to see this movie, and I still really enjoy it. I enjoyed it the first time. I probably saw it maybe 11 years ago now, maybe 12. I can't quite remember. But yeah, no, I don't have much else to say that you guys haven't already. It's perfectly cast. It seems so passionate and authentic. It feels like a true indie movie. Two people who just understand the craft and wanted to just get something out there that was just true and honest. And it comes across in spades in this movie. There's no extra flash. It's not filmed very well. It's very ugly, but none of that matters. What matters is the ideas, the conversation, the connection between these two guys. And this is the connection that we all want to have. We all want to have a conversation like this in our lifetimes where we really connect with someone. And most of us have at some point, right? Whether it was like at some party when you were in high school or, or college or some book club you were in or whatever. I'm sure someone has like gotten to this conversation in their lifetimes where they start to explain ideas and what they believe and how they perceive life and everything. These are the kinds of conversations that everyone wants to have, where they truly think about life and try to figure out where they're going, what they want, why they're not achieving that, and really taking a step back and analyzing it. All of that is done in this movie in such a way that it feels so natural. It's not ham-fisted. It's not boring. It's not contrived. It feels natural and it feels real. I think it's funny at the beginning of the movie when he's like, due to current economic downturns, my girlfriend has to work 3 nights a week. And it's like, yeah, shut up. But, other than that, it feels timeless. Other than maybe like some social things. But even their conversation, for the most part, feels timeless. Like, the conversation about electric blankets could have been had today. But you could also replace electric blankets with smartphones or any number of conveniences that we have in our modern day life that they didn't have then. But it doesn't feel so dated, It doesn't feel like they're not talking about things like rotary phones or like, you know what I mean? Things that aren't around
whoever
anymore.
The current president was, Reagan?
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do their best to make sure that these are timeless conversations that could be just as relevant, 50 years later or 20 years before. Maybe not an electric blanket thing, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's very, very expertly put out there to where it dates itself as little as possible. And the conversation still holds up. It's still relevant to the human condition and what we're all going through and depression and all that stuff. And so a lot of their fears about society also that they talk about have come to fruition in a lot of ways. So anyway, I think it's just a fascinating little movie. It's not exciting, but if you like dialogue, you like conversations, you like plays. If you like podcasts. If you like podcasts, you could listen to this movie as a podcast and it would just be like this really like cool conversation about philosophy and whatnot. So anyways, I recommend it completely. I really enjoy this movie. I don't love it. I noticed on our Letterboxd ratings, I have this rated the lowest. But
where are you at?
That's splitting hairs. I'm at a 4 out of 5. Solid 4 out of 5.
Yeah, and I'm at a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, and I saw Chris was at 4.5. So it seems like we're all pretty enthusiastic about it.
We all like it, but we're in sort of a step ladder.
Yeah,
stepping down.
Yeah, but it's splitting hairs. I wouldn't want to live on the difference between how much more you guys like it than me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I understand. This could be a hard movie to really just go full on like loving it. You know what I mean? Because I struggle too. I'm like, when we were doing our top 10 episodes recently, this was on my list, like my very first short list. But
yeah,
when you're talking about your favorite movies and the best movies ever made or something, the movies you think are the best, it's like this one's so minimal. It's tough to really include in that sort of conversation.
It's also one of those, like, I imagine in film school and stuff like that, they present with you like the question, why should this be a film? Like what makes this story in need of being filmed as opposed to being a play or being a book or being a podcast, right? And I think that question is up in the air with this. I love the film, but like when that question is presented, it could be any of those things, right? It could very well be a play or a podcast, like you guys said. So there's like, why a film? Like what differentiates it from any of the other mediums? Why does it need to be a film?
I feel like even as a play, this might be a little too uneventful to be compelling unless you're like a very intimate play.
Well, it's because so much happens through the performances that we get via the close-up of the camera.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That I think as a play, you would miss a lot of that.
And they're very naturalistic performances for the screen. Like on a play, they'd have to project and be all...
They'd have to get a little bit bigger.
It'd be like, kind of ham it up a little bit because that's what you have to do in plays. And a lot of these conversations I don't think would lend themselves to that kind of, I don't want to say insincerity, but like I think the naturalism of capturing it for the camera on screen really benefits these kinds of like these conversations they're having about life, about philosophy, about the human condition, about midlife crises, you know, everything in between. I think the intimacy of the camera is, well, I think it's I would hate to see this movie, or I would hate to see the story without it.
Maybe this is obvious, but the opening and closing segments, I think, add something, even though they're ugly visuals. I think there's some interesting visual things going on between the world that Wallace Shawn is walking through as he's narrating the beginning of the movie versus his taxi ride home at the end of the movie. They feel very different.
There's certainly a moment that I would not want to lose, and that is, it tells you everything about Wallace Shawn's character, or Wallace Shawn. But it's the moment where he goes up to the restaurant, looks at the sign, and puts on his tie. Puts on a tie. And I think that tells you kind of everything you need to know about him as he walks into this restaurant.
And then the next thing he does is he orders like potato soup.
Yeah.
Which is like the simplest thing I think he probably could have ordered in a restaurant like that.
Yeah, I don't think he understands anything else that's on the menu.
Yeah, he was like
the same thing.
Yeah, he's like, Andre seemed to understand everything about the menu.
And while we're on the restaurant, one of the things that I like, and this goes towards something you said earlier, Mike, about how this film kind of feels timeless, and at least in terms of like the conversations and the themes that they're talking about. But I think one of the things that really helps with that is the restaurant setting itself. Like once you're in that restaurant, I think you kind of lose any real sense of technology or time or place. Like, and it's such an interesting looking restaurant. Yeah. Like is it an old restaurant that's existed since like the 20s?
Well, because it's such a fancy restaurant and people have to dress up to go there. Dress clothes can look pretty similar.
Yeah. It just enters this weird world when you're in that restaurant. I think this weird thing that you can really lose track of. Like, when is this movie modern? Or, I mean, I guess they talk about electric blankets, of course, but like, I don't know. There's something interesting about that location to me.
Yeah, well, it's like they took great pains. Okay, so sidebar. I was watching a long time ago. I believe, Silence of the Lambs. And I think it was the director commentary with Jonathan Demme, or maybe it was just an interview with Jonathan Demme after I just recently saw the movie. I can't quite remember which. But as I was watching Silence of the Lambs, Jonathan Demme said that he wanted to make sure that the movie didn't feel dated from the wardrobe.
Yeah.
So when shooting it, planning it, everything, he did the hairstyles, he did the wardrobe, and things that didn't feel of the time on purpose. He wanted it to feel like any time. It could have been the 70s, or it could have been the 90s, or it could have been 2000. And granted, you can only do that so much, right? You don't know what the future is going to hold or what people are going to dress like in the future. But I think it shows when people try to make sure their movie does not feel dated. I think it can really stand, because I mean, if you watch Silence of the Lambs now, it doesn't necessarily scream 1992 or whatever, you know?
Yeah, not visually, at least.
Sure, right.
But I think we did a whole episode. Did we? We did an episode on Silence of the Lambs, right?
Yeah, we did Silence of the Lambs, and we talked about how freaking good it is.
Yeah, so good. But one of the other things you said, Mike, was that you feel like a lot of the conversations that they talked about, their worries about society and where it was, some of their worries about it came true. What I found interesting watching it last night, I was like, they kind of feel like society is already there. So some of this stuff does feel a bit prophetic, right? Of like, oh, we don't take the time to have these conversations with each other, and people don't talk to each other anymore. And maybe I don't know if it's exaggerated now, or if is it just something that everybody who hits this age that we all are now, in like mid 30s, do we look at the world and see it as a changing place? You know what I mean? And we feel like, oh, that's come true now, but I feel like they feel the same way. Like, I feel like it was already true for them, right?
Yeah,
like they're
every
not
generation feels like they're witnessing the end of everything.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's like, do you remember back before Louis C.K. was shamed from our collective consciousness.
Yeah.
He had this skit one time on I think Conan or something, where he talks about how like everything is amazing and no one's happy. Like we have like he was talking about at the time, the newest thing that he knew of that existed was Wi-Fi on a plane. And this is like 2012 or something like that, right? And he was talking about how he was on the plane and some guy was like connected to the Wi-Fi and he was trying to send something and it was going really slow. And so he was getting really mad at his phone. And Louis C.K. was like, give it a minute. It's got to go to space. And like...
yeah.
Like,
that's a great sketch.
Yeah. And basically he's just saying that like, we forget how to be people because we just distract ourselves. Like we go and like, when we go to the bathroom now, 30 years ago, we had to just sit in silence and think about going to the bathroom and think about our day and our life and what's going on in our lives. And that's like a 3 or 4 minute time where we don't talk to anybody or whatever, how long you go to the bathroom. I don't know. Right.
I always had a magazine. That was
well. There you go. But like maybe you always tried to escape there, right? But but the point that Louis C.K. was making was that like we have enough in front of us now, enough stimulation that we forget how to be people. Like we don't just sit with like when we sit and we get uncomfortable with our thoughts, we pull out our phone or a magazine or whatever, some distraction. But really, it's good for us to just sit there in our own misery for a little bit. So we're like, how can I better my situation? Why am I like this? What can I do with my life to make this different? Or whatever, right? But instead, it's just constant stimuli. And we forget how to get in touch with like the part of ourselves that can better ourselves or think deeper or self-actualize or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's the electric blanket.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, to them, it was the electric blanket. To Louis C.K. a few years ago, it was a cell phone. So I think it's always prevalent in society, this idea that it's the fall of Rome just around the corner, you know?
Right. And actually, one of the things I found interesting about this, because he talked about like sleepwalking through life, essentially. He called like real life the dream world, right? And something needs to come along to shake us out of that, you know? And my thought was, we are literally in the middle of something that has changed the way we look at the world in several different ways. Several different events from this year have happened that have done that. You know, like mainly the first one being the pandemic, and kind of making it so that like I'm no longer sleepwalk. Maybe I'll get used to the pandemic and go back to sleepwalking with a mask on, you know, but certainly this year has been a shakeup to how I normally live my life, you know, and I've had to reevaluate that stuff. You know, does that make sense? And that was kind of the interesting thing for me, because he also says something about the 60s, about how the 60s was the last time that there was like any humanity, any brightness in humanity, and then everybody has just started to sleepwalk. Well, I think there are events happening currently that are very similar to the 60s too. So I did find that interesting, and maybe how cyclical time is, you know.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think that what you're saying, like, yeah, it does feel like people are sleepwalking a lot of times, but where I think I disagree is I'm a little more pessimistic. I feel like we think we're awake now, but we're still sleepwalking through the current events. You know what I mean? Like, I think things here are going to get so much worse. And I don't see them getting better. I just don't, because too many people are still sleepwalking and they're not paying attention to anything that's going on around them. And because there's so much stimulation that we don't have to focus on anything important. We can just escape into our own little bubbles. So I think their conversation's like spot on in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem with the comfort, right? Is like, as long as you maintain that level of comfort, which, you know, for a lot of people, maybe the pandemic isn't quite hitting them that way, right? Like, but you still have your phone to distract you. You still have
exactly.
social media, etc.
Like, I'm worried about the future of everything, but also simultaneously, I'm an introvert. So working from home for the past few months has been great. And this has been a great year for me personally.
Yeah.
But that said, I'm terribly depressed about the state of everything.
But it's shaking that up, right? Like for you know, and
you're still not going into work. I do think there's also, as far as this conversation goes with the two of them, and we're basically rehashing the conversation, which is great. But like while we're putting our own 2 cents in and like trying to figure out where we are. But like I can't fault Wallace Shawn for like, he has his electric blanket, he has his comfort and the coffee. You know, like he talks about just wanting to wake up for the coffee in the morning. And now if the coffee's ruined because a cockroach went into it, he'll be sad, but he'll get over it.
Yeah.
You know, like and I can't begrudge anybody that comfort. I can't begrudge anybody having an electric blanket, you know, like or being excited about their coffee in the morning. I do think that there's certainly a need to be awake about current events. I'm not sure how much Andre is talking about necessarily current events. It seems like the stuff that he's trying to wake up to is like, it almost seems like a religious experience that he's had.
Yeah,
And
he
it's
just
like
wants
he's
to
trying
feel alive, it seems like.
Yeah. It's like he's trying to sell Christianity or some sort of religion to Wallace Shawn is kind of how it feels to me when he's talking about it.
Well, it seems like to me... Oh, I'm sorry, go on.
I mean, but honestly, what I would say is like, yeah, we should be aware of current events for sure, but you also have your coffee too, and there's small pleasures, because that's what makes life worth living, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I definitely side more with Wallace more than Andre throughout their conversation. In fact, when I was watching it last night, man, for the first 30 minutes of the movie, I had forgotten how insufferable I found Andre. He's just such a pompous fool. Like, oh, I went there and they had these wonderful buildings and I had this most beautiful little experience and it was just so magical. And it's just like, good Lord, get over yourself, bro. And I mean, but to an extent, he's right. I'm not bored from listening to him. And I think he's well-spoken and great performance by Andre Benjamin. Is that what it is?
Andre Gregory. Andre Benjamin is
that the guy from
Outcast?
Andre Gregory. It's a great performance from him, and I think it's really naturalistic and it's wonderful. But man, I find him insufferable. Am I the only one?
Yes and no. I think that there are elements of what he's talking about that are very pretentious.
Yeah,
and I don't understand. How some of the things that he describes happening like can happen without everybody being a bit pretentious, and some of it sounds kind of forced. Of like,
it sounds.
Oh, I need to go have this crazy experience in a forest, and everybody gets out there, so they have a crazy experience in a forest because they all expect to have a crazy experience in a forest, right?
Yeah, and then we'll just dance.
Yeah, and like whereas if you're not going out to a forest with that intention, I think much more normal things would happen, right? It's like they're putting on a show for themselves, which I think is one of the interesting things that I find about Andre, because I think there's like his intentions are inspiring to me to like shake up your routine, go out there, experience something new, not be in a rut. And
sure. Yeah.
But I think there's a certain amount of forcing that happens with Andre. And I think part of it too is like, it's not just about those experiences, but also about telling other people that you did those things.
Yes.
And
yes,
that comes across to me as maybe one of Andre's primary goals with this conversation is to just unload all of this stuff. And I don't want to say brag about it, but just kind of be able to tell someone else about it.
Yeah. So when I was watching it this time, I was really keyed into the fact that Andre is not happy. He is in a terrible place. He mentions it like right off the bat, as soon as they meet. He's like, oh, I'm in a terrible place right now. And to Andre's credit, he does seem pretty braggy. He does be like, I had this crazy experience in some crazy country that you've never even thought about venturing to. Look at me, bragging rights. And Wallace does call him out on that later. But to Andre's credit, and I've been pretty hard on Andre, even though I like the guy, I will say that Wallace, at first, pries it all out of him. And Andre's like, are you sure you want to hear about all this? And because Wallace is insecure and because Wallace doesn't want to talk, he makes Andre do all the talking.
Yeah, he says he's like a private eye. He considers himself a private eye. He's going to ask questions.
Yeah. So to Andre's credit, it's not 100% his fault, but I do get the impression, like you were saying, that I think where I get so annoyed with him, or at least I did the second watch through, or third watch through, or however many times it's been for me, is it felt like he just couldn't wait to like a very hipster kind of vibe, right? Where he's like, he can't wait to tell you about how cool he is and all the cool things he did and how enlightened he is.
Can't wait to tell you about Arcade Fire's like first albums that you haven't heard of.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. Exactly, right.
I always thought of it as you have a friend, and then that friend goes off to church camp or something, and then they try to sell you on Jesus. They're like, I had this great experience. This person, like.
I don't think I've had anyone try to sell me on Jesus since I was like a little kid.
Well,
I think they knew it wouldn't go well.
I feel like it still happens to me. So, but
You want me to talk to them
that's
for
just
you?
what it kind of felt like. Huh?
You want me to talk to them for you? I guarantee it won't happen again.
Yeah, come on down. You can be my backup.
Yeah, I'll be like, have you accepted the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ into your life? And you'll be like, Mike, come here.
And I'll just snap my fingers.
Yeah, and I'll just come up from behind you and be like, move on, Chris, I got this.
Well, so that is one of the things that I really like that I think we get out of the narration, because, while Sean talks about, I don't necessarily want to have this conversation, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. And you do get that sense of, Andre's just kind of unloading on him. But what I find that sort of flips the script, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but I kind of read it this way, is the very last line of the movie when he's riding in the taxi cab and he says, well, one, Andre's had an effect on him because he decides to take a taxi ride, right? Whereas on the way there, we see him take the dirty, gross subway, right?
Yeah.
And he decides to treat himself to a taxi ride, and he is seeing the city differently, right? He says oh, I'm riding along and I've noticed all these places I have memories to. And it kind of feels like he's shaken up his routine and done something a little bit different. And he has this different perspective of the world, which is cool that, we see him grow from this conversation. But also I find it funny. The last line of the movie is, I got home and I told Michelle, or whatever his girlfriend's name is, I told Michelle all about my dinner with Andre. And so I have this image in my head of Wallace Shawn now being in the Andre Gregory role to his girlfriend, where he's just going to sit there and unload all of these stories on her.
It's possible. I do think the conversation changed Wallace Shawn. I think that he walked away a little bit different.
Yeah, so I don't know that it was the content of the conversation that changed him so much as what I always took this movie as is it's so rare that two people really connect about anything. They could have connected about any number of things. I don't think it was like the electric blanket conversation or Dancing Until Dawn that inspired Wallace, I don't think it was any of the subject matter. I think it was the true human connection, questioning life, questioning what we're all doing here, how we perceive life, what we want out of life, etc., etc. I think that's what really changes him, is because in the beginning, he was avoiding Andre for so long, and he's an autopilot. And what I take from this movie more than anything is that sometimes there are certain conversations that can happen that are just so rare that you just connect. And that can be therapeutic for people. It can be reassuring or reaffirming for people, right? To have that a true connection to where you have a real conversation. I don't know that he's going to go through and start living his life the way Andre tried to live his life.
No.
Going forward, telling stories, trying to have really outside the box experiences, going some tribe in Europe somewhere where you can live in the woods and eat mushrooms and cheese or whatever. I don't think he wants to do any of that, but I think it's the idea that who knows the last time he had a true connection where they just both questioned life together. We've all had those kinds of conversations sometime in the past, right? But they don't happen often.
No, and I think one of the points the film makes is that as you get older, those conversations happen less, right?
They happen less. You have less of an opportunity. You have less people that are on the same page as you who are willing to listen and then truly listen and not just wait for their turn to talk. But to Andre's credit and to Wallace's credit, they listened to one another. And then when it came time to talk, the other person would retort, disagree aggressively. And then there was no anger. It was just but don't you see? And it was just this, yeah, but part of the conversation. And they were just truly listening and waiting for the other person to finish. And through so many normal conversations, we're all on autopilot, right? We're all just oh, they're done talking. Now it's time for me to say the thing I'm going to say.
Yeah. Or it's, hey, we haven't seen each other in a few years. And they skim over this part of the conversation because they do talk about Zanga, but it's how's work going? What are you doing?
Yeah, the
Oh,
pleasantries
cool.
that
It's
we all do.
the small talk. Did you see the football game, right? And I at least that's my experience. Like, is not to get too personal, I guess, but the last time I remember having any sort of conversation like this, maybe with the exception of this podcast, when we've had like a theme of a film really hit us and we get into a discussion kind of like we are now, even though it's kind of based on a movie and not personal. But college, I think, was maybe the last time that I had a really deep conversation like that, right?
Like something stimulating that you're just like, oh, okay, I have to really stretch my brain to like see how I feel about this.
Yeah. Early to mid 20s, somewhere in there, like early on in college, not counting. I didn't have those in like my graduate years, I don't think. But I just think there's a point that the film makes that, we don't have this very long, that we don't have these conversations often enough. And I think just the initial decision, whether it was necessarily his, of Wallace Shawn to go to this dinner at all, is one of the things that shakes up his comfort.
Oh man, I relate to that because I'm an introverted guy and I don't like to leave my house, especially for someone I haven't seen in a long time. I'll start making excuses in my brain to not do it.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? And I'll be like, what can I do to cancel it? What can I do to cancel it? And then once I've done it, I've enjoyed myself. But I hate
like
making plans and like the anxiety leading up to doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hate it.
I know that feeling.
And you're right. It's been a long time since I've had a really truly stimulating conversation that I felt like that alive afterwards. Where I went home and like the conversation stayed with me and like I felt changed me somehow. I think probably college is a similar time.
I've actually. Oh, go ahead.
I would say like I remember conversations with Justin and I have had about like religion and God and whether or not we believe in that kind of stuff. But that's been many years since those have all happened,
Yeah.
I've actually had the opportunity, and I think I've had this conversation. I mean, other than the podcast, because I like the Tokyo story is a conversation that like I'll always remember and has struck me and hit me hard. But at work, which is the worst place to have this conversation, but there's a guy I work with who is essentially Republican. And we have like sat down and talked about stuff like, maybe I shouldn't say, but like he has different political views than I do. And like we both listen, and it's been interesting to see how we've both changed through those conversations that we've had. But it's like, once you get past the Facebookness of it, where we're like the opposite political views are yelling at each other or whatever, just talking it out and being like, well, this is why I feel this way, or this is why, why he feels that way. And like understanding that has really helped out. Anyways, it's kind of a sidebar, but it's been really interesting to have those conversations. And he's changed through the time that we've talked, and that's been really interesting. I have too, I'm sure, especially since the pandemic part of it. But anyways.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you're having those conversations.
Yeah.
Well, does anybody have anything else with this movie before we move on?
No, I don't think so. Other than just it holds up, and I think everyone should watch it.
Yeah, it really does, and like it flies by to me. Like I said, so like it's a 2-hour movie where two people just talk. Get over that. You're gonna like this movie. Just watch it.
Yeah, I could go home and watch it again tonight because at the same time, there is so much dialogue in this movie that, I think you have to watch it multiple times to really catch it all, right? It is just kind of wall to wall talking,
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's funny when you start looking at films and cinema and studying that sort of thing, that you get into this idea of, show me, don't tell me. That's like a big thing that they talk about a lot with like film theory and studying film and filmmaking is, show, don't tell, right? Don't be expository with your dialogue unless you have to be. And this film kind of is a rare example of something that bucks against that, where it's literally the whole thing is not showing anything. But it is a lot, right? It is a lot to grasp. So I think it stays interesting, and it also just holds up on repeat viewings because there are parts of the conversation you're going to forget that don't sink in, that won't sink in until the second time. They won't sink in until you're older too, some of them. You know, if you're like 18 watching this film, I'm sure you will probably enjoy it if you're seeking out this sort of film anyways. But as you get older, you'll enjoy it more and more.
For sure.
Yeah, agreed.
All right.
One last thing. This is actually produced by Troma Films, or at least the guy that owned Troma Films helped produce this. So I do find that fun.
Yeah, we actually didn't talk about Louis Malle very much, you know? And I think kind of his role as director is important in getting performances out, and his decision to keep this film focused on the characters and not give us a bunch of other visuals to try to keep it interesting. I think that's important, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to talk about him as a director with this film.
Yeah, he doesn't stand out style-wise in this too much. I've seen a couple other of his movies, more than a couple. I've seen Murmur of the Heart. I've seen Lacombe Lucien. This and
Elevator to the Gallows.
Elevator to the Gallows. Yeah, and maybe another. I think, if I'm being honest, this is definitely the least interesting as far as like the way it's filmed. Murmur of the Heart and Lacombe Lucien aren't like expertly filmed or anything, but this is so minimal. That said, I think it's probably my favorite of his films that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, he does something that's really great in just taking a step back. Like, this movie isn't about me as the director. This movie is about these two guys talking. Like, he does have like moments where he pushes in really close to Andre's face, you know, to create suspense and stuff. But for the most part, he just lets them do their thing. And I think that's admirable. Like, I'll direct this, but I'm going to let you guys are the ones that are going to shine, not me. You know, I think that's admirable.
Yeah, totally. So that's my kudos to him, you know, is for knowing to stay minimal and to not be in the way of this script and these two guys.
All right. So are we ready to go ahead and move into our next Casually Criterion poll?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. So thanks for joining us for that review of My Dinner with Andre. Okay, guys. So our next Casually Criterion poll theme is going to be based off sci-fi horror because it's inspired by Lovecraft Country, which we talked about earlier. So, guys, what science fiction horror in the Criterion Collection are you guys putting forward? Starting with Chris.
Oh, awesome. I get to go first, which means you guys can't pick mine first. The one I picked is a very big classic film, and I don't think we've done any of his films, but it's Night of the Living Dead. I think that's a really good one to pick. It's kind of starts the whole zombie thing. I think there were zombies before this and stuff, but
and
not in the same way.
Paved the way for one of the first African-American main protagonists as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it has its own, like, it actually works really well with Lovecraft Country. So
yeah, I was about to say, that's actually probably the most perfect pick you could have made to go with the thing we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. I feel so great. Not that you guys can outdo this, but go ahead, Justin. What's your pick?
I think I'm going to go very, very pulpy, sort of, or very, very much in that Lovecraft sort of vein, and pick an H.G. Wells adaptation, which is, it's actually one that I have not seen, at least not this version of it, but that's The War of the Worlds, which is a pretty recent release.
Yeah.
But this is the 1953 version, not the Steven Spielberg version, for anybody who's not aware.
Awesome.
But I haven't seen this one, so I'm really excited to check it out. So, Mike, what is your choice?
All right. So I'm picking one that is maybe a little less pulpy, a little less horror-based, but it still counts, I think. And this is a film I've only seen once, but has always stayed with me, and that is a 1960 French horror drama called Eyes Without a Face.
Oh.
I had a feeling you were going to pick one of two movies, and this was one of the ones.
What was the other one you thought? Because I had
Carnival
another movie
of
in mind.
Souls?
Nope. Ha.
Nope. Okay.
I was going to go with Kiriniko.
Oh, yeah. I should have guessed. Because I know you love like that film and Onibaba, and when we do like horror-y type stuff on here, those come up.
Yep.
I thought he'd pick Onibaba again.
Yeah.
Now, that one's a little too straightforward and not, like, science fiction-y enough, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That one, because there's not really any science fiction that happened, or, like, ghost elements that happen in that particular movie. But
Yeah.
Kiraniko, not quite the same. That's a ghost story through and through.
True. Did you guys have any other ones that you thought about picking?
No, other than, like, maybe Fiend Without a Face, or I went through, like, the typical, like, schlocky 50s American sci-fi.
Yeah,
Adventures of Robinson Crusoe on Mars, I was thinking about.
Oh, I've actually seen that. That's good.
Yeah,
awesome.
That's a fun one. That would have been cool. I was thinking also about maybe Island of Lost Souls, which is another H.G. Wells.
Yeah, the Island of Lost Souls is what I was thinking about the very beginning when we first started talking about this theme, because I still have not seen that yet. But I actually watched The Island of Dr. Moreau, and we all did, I think, recently.
Yeah, we did, that was why it was on my short list too, because I was like, I need to see this version, because man, that other version does not work. But the only other one I was thinking about was leaning a little bit more into the sci-fi and less so the horror. I was thinking about going back into Tarkovsky and picking Solaris, but
Yeah.
I think I'm feeling a little bit more pulpy thanks to Lovecraft Country.
Yeah, I was like, Lovecraft, the Solaris is not Lovecraft.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's just sci-fi, and it's a movie I would like to watch again. So
Heard that, yeah.
you know, I'm down to squeeze that square peg into that round hole.
We'll get to it.
That's what
at
I'm
some
trying to do a
point.
little bit with Eyes Without a Face.
Yeah, I think it works though.
I could always call it by the American name.
What is that?
Let me see.
Is it not Eyes Without a Face?
No, it's American name for Eyes Without a Face. It's like trashy and pulpy. Like make it seem like it's like something it's not.
This is like the girl without skin on her face.
No, it's like the horror cabinet of. Let me see if I can. It's like a totally trash name.
The Horror Chamber of Dr. Faustus.
Yeah, that's it. The horror chamber. Yeah, so that doesn't fit.
That's fun.
Yeah, it is. It's like with the American title when it came over here and they didn't know how to market it.
Yeah, and that's understandable. And it's not really what the movie is, but oh well.
No, yeah, exactly. Okay, so there you go.
Yeah. So to recap, your choices for the poll are Eyes Without a Face, The War of the Worlds, and Night of the Living Dead.
I feel pretty confident about this one.
Yeah, that's a good poll.
What? Yeah. I don't know who will win this one.
Probably not me. Probably Chris. But maybe you.
Yeah.
You guys have some pretty
Maybe War of
recognizable
the Worlds, but
things.
I feel like Night of the Living Dead wins.
Yeah. Maybe if we change the name to the Horror Cabinet of,
Dr.
or
Faustus.
the Horror Chamber of Dr. Faustus. That might get people's
Hands
attention.
down. Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else before we end this episode?
No, I think I'm good.
No.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And of course, as always, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
All right, so stay tuned to this channel. Our next episode will probably be over whatever wins this poll that we just talked about right now. Normally, we like to space it out, but I think we'd rather just do another Criterion next week. So
Yeah.
See you there.
Criterions are fun. That's why we do this.
All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. And your homework for this week is to run out into the woods and eat mushrooms and cheese just to shake it up a bit.
and dance until dawn or whatever.
We'll see you next time.
And don't use your electric blanket, okay?
Yeah. Turn off your
Turn it
electric.
off.
Reconnect with
Turn
yourself.
that thing off.
Reconnect with the world. Be cold.